Welcome to our presentation. This is an interactive workshop. What is supposed to happen if you want to follow format, and I recommend you do because I'm not going to be responsible for the results if you don't, is everyone should be at a table and you'll be collaborating with your table mates. Dallin and I are going to talk about a couple things. We're going to go through a few slides. We're going to set the stage. But the idea here is for the individual tables to think about the overall context of what we're saying, bounce ideas around, and then come back and we're going to do kind of a group discussion and talk about a couple of those things. So this is a premise that Dallin and I came up with relative to sort of the ongoing progression of digital technology as it impacts the restaurant space. Dave Stubbs was supposed to join us, but he had to leave unexpectedly earlier today. But I think we can get past this without him.
No problem. No problem.
So digital transformation was a term coined probably by someone at PwC or McKinsey probably 20 years ago, I guess. And it really meant the world where web infrastructure started to have a meaningful impact on the physical world, that we all live in. And one of our contentions is that the restaurant industry has kind of reached digital transformation 1.0 pretty broadly, but there's a whole bunch of things that are actually going to be coming next. And the purpose of this discussion is to sort of air some of those things out and just talk about it. And we're not here to promote any one technology or any one approach, nor are we here to tell you what will work and what won't, because I think that is something that only time will tell to some extent. But there are some major things that are sort of emerging relative to the technology's direction, which will impact the restaurant industry, but really more broadly, the whole world. And some of them are very, I think some of them are very compelling. A lot of them are going to have unintended consequences to how we do business, how we work together, how we serve our customers, how we operate our restaurants, how we take care of our associates. But importantly, I think these things are going to happen whether we want them to or not. So a lot of this is about sort of understanding context and sharing ideas and trying to be stronger together. So a couple of the things that I have up on the slide deck here, which represent transformation 1.0, are pretty obvious. I think the biggest single one is the rise of e-com and online ordering. Some of our customers are now seeing north of 70% of their online orders, or all orders in their physical stores, be online based, and that's pretty huge change, and it happened in terms of time relatively quickly. I mean, this is something that accelerated through COVID, as everyone knows, and we're now in a world where how much further from 70% are we going to get to? And there are folks obviously that are building entire businesses based on the fact that they have no necessary physical restaurant; it's all ghost based and such. And whether that works or not is again also remains to be seen. But
am I allowed to interrupt?
Yeah, please. That's the idea.
So somebody said a great thing last night, and it really resonated with me. I wish I could quote it perfectly, but basically they said that 1.0 was the realization that the restaurant is just now where food is prepared, not where our guests are. Right? We got to realize that we got to look more at that brick and mortar as how do we improve speed of service? How do we get people out there? Because it's just the food prep, not where people are necessarily sitting. So I'd encourage y'all, as part of you, at least if you're continuing on that 1.25 journey, keep that in mind, especially when you're explaining it to your peers and counterparts.
Yeah, I mean, that gets to the larger point, which I think we all understand, is that the more we move into this new world, the more important guest experience becomes, and we want the technologies we implement to positively impact guest experience, not negatively. But sometimes we don't necessarily get that. Yeah. So a couple of things just in the 2.0 space, and this is, again, not necessarily an exhaustive list, but the first point is, connected kitchen technologies and IoT and how that impacts food prep, how that impacts quality, how that impacts cost, I think are important. And again, I'm not trying to pick winners or losers out of the technology space, but more and more and more, we're seeing the systems that go into restaurants, particularly ones that go into the kitchen, are, quote, smart, unquote, have an IP address, produce data, and the point around that is how are we using that? Well, what benefit are we getting out of it, or not? And Dallin, feel free to interrupt me. Okay.
No, I had a giggle. If some of you saw my son walking around the floor with me today, it's been in a lot of conversations, and he basically said to me, "Dad, out of the 20 conversations I heard today, 18 of them started with AI, and I don't think that they understand that it's not necessarily the AI they think it is."
Yeah, that's a good one. I do have AI and ML here as one of the categories. This is really, at least in our experience, a lot about machine learning, much more than it is about any kind of broader AI technology. But it is just, as a society as a whole, is going to be significantly impacted by machine learning and the ability to run what are really an entirely new set of algorithms relative to decision making and categorization of data. So a adjacent space to that is the world of machine vision, where machine learning can be used to teach a camera to recognize and establish metadata to specific objects. So we've had customers, for example, in this world, try to harness machine vision to track and improve food quality and food prep and deal with orders. And there are a lot of vendors in the next room that are selling technology around this. The majority of those vendors are not going to end up surviving long term. Some will. And there'll be new ones that we haven't seen yet that will as well. There's going to be, again, I kind of think we're going to see a world where cameras and those cameras being able to be intelligent devices are going to be pretty ubiquitous. The question is how we're going to use them, and we'll get into maybe some more detail on that. Robotics is another one. So this is all about being able to use machines more intelligently for food prep. And I'm glad I did not see Flippy on being demoed this time around, which I was glad. I think the way, again, robotics are going to be hardest or different than the way a lot of people think. I think they're going to be very, very specialized systems that are going to be used for very atomic parts of food prep to deal with things that are otherwise, a pain in the neck for people to do. Again, some of this all ties to other broader challenges such as labor costs and the like. And then the last piece sort of here is another 2.0 is fully integrated order routing. The idea that right now we're dealing with a pretty fragmented world in order routing. We've got third-party delivery systems, orders being captured by different providers. One provider handing an order off to another provider, which finally ends up into an order management system within a kitchen somewhere on a KDS, having that order placed into a bag by a person and that bag being put there. So there's a lot of opportunity to streamline this. And, we're already seeing the different players in the space buying one another. We're starting to see, I think, a better set of standards. That's one of the things I like from RTN is the ability to set standards up that people then can adapt and use.
Last year, I'm going to say this, a bunch of people know I said some very unpopular things last year about kiosks. So I'll try and control myself. But RTN feels like the place I'm going to get in trouble this year. Because I was around when IX Retail came about. I was in the retail side at that point. We all went, OPOS, standard format. We're all going to integrate devices together this way. It's going to be amazing. You can just unplug one printer in, put another one in, and never really happened. So all the folks that are doing the RTN, encourage it, lovely. Just, I feel jaded.
Yeah, that's understandable. But it is the OPOS and JPOS and those standards were able to allow a lot of different manufacturers produce devices that work with a lot of other ones. So I'd say it was successful, not perfect. Again, in this world relative to the standard sets, I think our industry does not benefit when one, third-party commercial vendor gets to set a standard that we then all have to follow. So I like the idea of the industry itself creating its own standards and then asking those third-party application providers to adopt our standard, not us being forced to use theirs.
Yep.
So getting back into looking at, sort of 1.0 versus 2.0, here's just a quick laundry list. And the reason we're going through this in this basis is because, again, part of the plan here is we're going to come together and then talk about these things individually. And that's going to happen in the next 6 or 7 minutes. So I'm going to have to go a little faster. But so a couple of things that just to note. Legacy, and we all still live with a lot of legacy in our lives. There's no perfection here. But it's sort of the predominance of the monolithic client-server environment where we've got a server. Even if that server is located in the cloud, it's still a server. And that server then has a database associated with it, and all the application runs on it. I'll go into what 2.0 looks like in a second. Often these systems are Microsoft Windows-based. Often you have a lot of standalone physical hardware. There's a lack of observability or reactive approach to customers to system support. There's a lot of configurations to manage in the store. It's slow to adapt, hard to change, monolithic, as I mentioned, and has a high total cost of ownership. So that's where we were. Now, there's been a lot of change, from when everybody was running these legacy systems. Now, there are absolutely cloud-first restaurant systems, including point-of-sale and kitchen systems that are, Android, tablet-based, and much lighter weight, and don't have a lot of these characteristics, but still a lot of within our environments, we still see a bunch of this. 2.0 means, things are different. So microservices, not monolithic. Cloud to edge as opposed to these big standalone systems operating within a store.
So this is point number 2, and this is very Zaxby's statement is around that edge computing, right? We're not risk averse, but we're also not very risk tolerant. And I will tell you from an edge side, and this is again, it's going to scale based on the type of restaurant you are, but every time you want to deploy a new piece of hardware, you have to send out a truck roll. So truck rolling to 1,000 restaurants becomes very expensive. So the initial ROI to try and bring down the edge computing side, it really has a very, very hard business case on our side. And then the second side of that is the concerns, and I'm surprised we haven't seen more conversations around PCI 4.0, but the concerns around PCI 4.0 and the segmentation of network and what's running, because the whole advantage of edge is I've got one unit in the cloud, that's the one unit in the restaurant that's handling whatever I want it to be, right? It's containerized. I can put whatever I want down there. But that also means it's pretty much on one segment, and I'm having to deal with a lot of the PCI concerns. And for those that are not watching 4.0, God, please get going, because this is not a last minute thing you can do. And what they term as bespoke pieces of software, pretty much anything you're pushing in from a Kubernetes deployment is guaranteed to be bespoke and fall into your PCI scope and cause you all kinds of grief. So every time I'm walking around the floor and I'm seeing these great things, and I think to myself, oh God, how are they doing this? And I see the little edge device. I go, oh, okay. Well, that just put a nice kibosh on it.
Yeah, those are some great points. It's what's interesting. Again, this goes well above and beyond, the restaurant and hospitality industry. But when you look at sort of where, the direction technologies are going, it's very much cloud to edge, where cloud is where we put our applications where we can, and edge is where we put applications where we must. Meaning, if you've got, workloads that need to do a lot of data processing, need to consume a lot of data, need to have very, very limited latency, those end up being edge-based, but they're coupled to the cloud. They don't stand among themselves. And there are no standards regarding edge architectures. There's only some general best practices, which are not necessarily very well communicated. I haven't seen a good, here's, a best practices guide to edge computing, particularly not one that's tailored to the restaurant industry. But the largest of the QSRs are all moving to edge-based architectures. One of our customers, Taco Bell, made that leap a couple of years ago. It's all microservices. It's all edge-based. And they solved some of the problems that Dallin mentioned by being able to have different microservices applications operating within different security zones within an edge fabric that's pretty flexible. The bottom point on this slide is probably one of the most important ones. We've seen this again and again and again. You can get to a place where there's just a lower total cost of ownership. That's because you need less hardware, your software is more agile, you have greater reliability, and your support costs end up dropping when done correctly. That's the key caveat. Yeah. So this, Dallin is completely right about the security aspects of this stuff, because it is important. It's important to get addressed both at the network egress and ingress point by everyone here who has a restaurant has a firewall in that restaurant. At least I hope so. Not all of the firewall technologies are necessarily that well adopted to sort of this new generation of computing, and that has to be taken into account. In addition, there are things that are changing pretty quickly, like PCI 4.0, which is, I think, March 15th, if I'm not mistaken, is the day it goes live, or we have to apply to it. And there's just a bunch of more things to do, and that's going to remain. So one of the things that has changed pretty quickly with some of those other transformation 2.0 points, like the connected kitchen and the IoT devices. Each one of those represents a potential threat vector. And many of those devices, you're not dropping antivirus on it. You're not even necessarily able to easily scan it. You don't even know what software is running on it. And many of them go straight up to the cloud to a vendor portal with an encrypted channel, which you've got no visibility into. So we're going to get to the point soon, it hasn't happened yet, but we're going to start to see a progression of very serious breaches based on this type of stuff. So anyone that's thinking about this, from a security standpoint, how are you addressing edge, your secure edge? How are you protecting these devices? What are you allowing these third-party application providers or IoT providers, or in some case vendors, service providers, what are you allowing them to do, and how do you know what they're doing?
And I'll take that a step further, is a lot of your IP and a lot of your PII risks actually fall into that same edge space, right? The computer vision, we can talk about computer vision. It's fine if you're looking at chicken, but as soon as you start looking at people, you start looking at cars and drop license plates, then you start having a PII concern. And if that's a vector that people are coming in, you've got a PII at rest or a PII in flight. And it really is probably the weakest point in your overall network. So really it's the AI component tied to your weakest point really makes a lot of people nervous.
Yeah, that's true. And Europe and California are ahead of a lot of the rest of the United States with a regulatory framework to address this type of data, and we're all going to have to find a way to comply to it. And the only way you can comply to something is to understand what it is. All right, so we're moving to the interactive portion of this session soon enough. But to get there, we want to sort of start talking about what the next generation of applications look like, what the next generation of platforms look like. We're interested in questions as much as we are answers, and we're really interested in trying to figure out how we can collectively share experience. So the goal is to get together and just start having some group conversations about some of these ideas and challenge us. I mean, I'd be happy to hear from some of you guys that you violently disagree with anything I said, or what Down said. He certainly would tell me if he disagrees with me.
Yes, no problem.
Yeah. So with that said, please huddle up, and let's go into it. We're going to reconvene sort of like interactively as a panel. Dallin and I, or at least myself, I'll start circulating a bit, jump to table to table to table.
And this really isn't a spectator sport. So y'all that are in the back there's so many open chairs at these tables. Yeah. Please come forward.
You can also opt out too if you really don't want. All right, folks. We're going to hopefully move to some of the Q&A. We got a little less than 10 minutes left, so I was going to just go around table to table to table, Dallin and I, sort of get some of your thoughts. It could be either a question for the group, or it could be an observation you think is interesting, sort of based on the experience we had. So anyone want to go first? Come on, what table's been working hard? Anybody? Thoughts? Nothing? No?
I like questions better.
Yeah. I can summarize. Please, I'll take that.
We identified more pains than necessarily solutions. I think in general, there was a concept around, so we tried to define like whether things will move to the cloud as a primary or whether we'll keep using like the restaurant as the on-premises as the primary, and a little bit of the disaster and failover recovery piece. But then there's also just the recognition that if you can't increase the pipe size of the bandwidth coming in and out, that's just a secondary point of consideration. So we just talked about all the needs for point of sale and loyalty and marketing and customer Wi-Fi and tablet Wi-Fi and everything else. And like just trying to put together a holistic strategy that allows you to manage that. And many of the operators have places in rural locations. So that adds another layer of complexity to it. So we didn't solve it, but I think we identified 3 pains.
Yeah, but on that note, I mean, one thing we do know is that, bandwidth, both capacity and capacity is going up and cost is generally going down. And there are new things coming online, like, we've been playing around with Starlink, and it's impractical right now due to cost and reliability. It can be spotty, but as that network matures, as other competing low Earth orbiting satellites come on, it'll be another arrow in the quiver, I guess. And then similarly, 5G was way overhyped. I don't know if anyone finds that to be a controversial statement, but it is something and it's available. So bandwidth is going to improve, but still, again, I don't know if it's going to keep up with some of the demands you talked about. So when we get into things like some of the running ML models on vision, processing, or the fact that even the signage systems, it's like 4K, displays, 8K displays, like those images have to get to the store in order to put them up. That just requires more bandwidth. So,
I feel like my vendors need to start paying me commission from these conversations, but I hate to share these secrets with you guys. So if you guys are tracking T-Mobile and the things that they're doing, I don't know how much you all are watching, but T-Mobile introduced their $50 unlimited on their 5G. I agree with you. Don't get me wrong. The 5G is still better than 4G. I still get in most of my locations. I get 50 down, 20 up, 30 up, which is wonderful, wonderful. It's stable enough that I can run Celestial as my primary in a lot of locations, especially when terrestrial is so weak. I've got places out. A lot of Zaxby's, they're quite far, right? They're not really in the major cities. And the trick with T-Mobile is during the acquisition, they negotiated with who was the FDD, FCD, whatever the governing body is, that they were required to improve the 5G network out in rural first before they can move into the dominant cities. So what we find is you go between AT&T and you go between, sorry if the Verizon guy is here, but between AT&T and T-Mobile, for $50, $50. I mean, most of us were spending $300, $400, right? And I don't have to worry about running cable and pulling fiber in a new. So I would tell you guys that from a primary and a backup, you keep a Celestial terrestrial, even two Celestials, and you're running really, really well now. So I hate to share that secret. Don't go and run and tell everyone else. But for $50, you can't go wrong.
Yeah, there'll be no bandwidth left for down if you guys all buy
Poor my Zaxby's.
that. Anyone else? We have another 5, 7, 8 minutes or so. No one else wants to share? Let's go.
We had a solution here. Let's chat at our table. They were talking about a good solution that they have for both removing friction on the employee side with changing the languages to whatever the person's used to seeing, as well as for the customer side. So they can see the menus and they can see the ordering and they can order. So that's interesting to me, especially as we grow into international. But even you talked about use cases even locally where you have communities where you have people of different ethnicities coming in and making it less friction for them to be able to read your menus and see what they want to order. So that's interesting. The other part that I brought up from an operator, I work for Habit Burger, which is part of Yum, and I work in the IT department. And so I work a lot with the MURTEC stack and the marketing team and what they're doing. And we've put in Braze for engagement, but the next platform I need to look at is CDP. And we have years of data, sales data already from our POS. We have now the digital source. We have so much data, and now you're talking about a CDP platform. I was saying one of the challenges for IT is, yes, I can implement this for marketing, but they have to have a brain in front of all that data to ask the right question, to pull out the right queries, to use this data. And I think that's part of our next transformation, helping the rest of the business understand where they need to mature in 2.0 to use this vast amount of data that we've collected.
Yeah, and one note on that. 2-3 years ago, there were a very small number of people that could use an ML model to do data analysis. 2 or 3 years from now, there's going to be a lot of people using ML models for data analysis all the time because they're going to get easier to use. And you're going to have people that, I don't know if they're going to go full brain, but they'll at least go half brain. They're going to be able to get the support from supporting systems and come up with interesting insights out of data that today they look at it and they're just like, they don't know what they're looking at.
And I would tell you, it's for those that heard me talk about, I actually don't come from restaurants. I come from amusement parks. And the outside view of our industry, or now my industry, is it seems like you always hear the same names, right? And they're paired together. I'm like, it's PAR and Freedom Pay, right? Okay, great. I'm just guarantee you that if you're using PAR, you're probably using Freedom Pay. You using Freedom Pay? No. Okay. Well, there you go. I am. But with Braze, I hear M particle, M particle, M particle, M particle. So you're gigantic. Leave us small guys alone. But for the most part, I hear M particle Braze, M particle Braze, M particle Braze. And you're right, from a CDP perspective, and what I've seen and heard, what I've seen firsthand, and what I've heard secondhand, is that's because they basically, joined at the hip and seen the future, and they're trying to help us go. We're not big enough to do the Taco Bell 800 billion restaurants and drive their own technology. I love you, man. I'm just playing. So they really are. So when you start to listen to the industry, you start to hear the heartbeat is these guys are smart. Like they're making money, and they only make their money by partnering up with each other and bringing each other along. And Braze and M particle, that seems to be like the names that are just tied together. We did it as part of our 2.0 transition, or we are doing it as part of our 2.0 transition. You're 100% right. Any marketing people in the room?
Yeah, they're on our radar for the
Okay, well, that would be, but you're 100, all us IT people know about marketing people. You leave them open, they're going to ask for the world, they're going to expect absolutely everything. You got to rein them in more than the finance folks. But you nailed it. Like CDP, get it defined up front. God help you.